Cool. Like I said, I like the cover. I like the inside cover when you flip open the book to where the lizard's in the shoe.
Yeah.
Because that's cool, man. It is that kind of digital, very 90s, I guess. But
Makes me think of Reboot. You ever see that show?
No, I never saw that.
It was a show that was like entirely in that animation style. Like everything about it was that kind of CGI level.
Now the cover is a little less impressive. I mean, they were figuring it out. You know, the first two covers of the first two books don't look like the rest of the series.
Yeah, it's really weird how like you would figure they would maybe like use the same people, the same models that they used for each one.
And they did after a while, but I remember it looked like, we'll get to episode 5, but I remember Marco, they may have used a female model for him, it looked like, but...
Oh, yeah, he was a real pretty kid.
So welcome, guys, to the world's only Animorphs podcast, episode 1, The Invasion, covering book 1 here. Of course you can read these online, right? But there's nothing like having the book. I mean, we're pretty sure that the books that you and I have, which are identical, which we're holding in our hands now, we're pretty sure these are the first pressing, right? The first printing ever?
Should be, yeah, because I mean, I feel like it's printing June 1996. It's got to be
96, huh? How old were you in 96?
96. I was quick math.
Because I was either 8 or 9.
9, yeah, I was 9.
Yeah, 9 years. So there you go, man. This is,
depending on what time of the year.
Of course, I was always excited since my name is Michael, and this is Max right next to me here. I was always excited that it says for Michael in the what do you call that? The dedication, the foreword, which is Catherine Alice Applegate's husband, right? The author's husband.
Yeah, Michael. What is it, Grant? I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was always like, "Hey, cool, man, my name is there." But this is where it all begins.
Probably felt like a personal tale for you at that point.
Yeah, a little bit. But this is where it all begins, man. This is where they encounter Elfangor in the construction side of the mall. Yeah. It's cool. One thing I really like is how they just dive right into the book. You know, they just get like right into it. Like, right away they're at their mall and they all just kind of casually meet up. And we find out way later in the series that maybe it wasn't all so casual, but like that's the way it seems. It's all almost like accidental,
Right.
And it's just straight away they get into the depth of this series when they watch Elfangor slain by Visser 3. And it's like from that moment, there's not going to be any like sugarcoating this series. I mean, it's not like you said on the intro episode. This series wasn't made for kids. It was made for more like young adult, like teens.
It really was, yeah. Y7 plus or something. Yeah, if it was a TV, I think that's what the TV show ended up getting rated was Y7.
TV Y7. That's hilarious. What were some of your takeaways from like sort of the beginning of the book? Was it exciting for you to go back and start reading?
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the intro, my first one that got me hooked into the series was actually book 5 with Marco, which I don't know if it was because it was the first book that I read necessarily, but...
So you read 5, then you went back originally to 1, okay.
Exactly, and I had to like I used to go to Walden Books back in the day in the mall, the Northeast Mall in Hearst. They had a Walden Books that I would go into, and that's where I would do all my book shopping. And I used to love going over to that section and just like looking at all the various stuff that they had and seeing like how many new books have come out. Like do I get to read something
Do you remember
else?
the schedule they would come out on? Wouldn't it be like every 2 months, or would it be like once a month? Because for a while there, I caught up and I was like getting the books every single month when they would come out.
I don't know. I don't remember what the release scheduling was because
I feel like a show dropping.
Yeah, I feel like I was kind of behind enough at one point that I know I caught up because I was waiting for like the final books. But I can't remember when along the lines that was. That was like already Y2K.
Yeah. And there's some of the books in the series that throughout the years have been lost or tossed out or let someone borrow, never got them back or something. But book 1 I have, and obviously you do too. It's funny because both our covers are like falling off, the pages are falling out.
And it's also funny, they say inside of the cover right under where they think Michael, or say it's for Michael, is that if you find this book without a cover, it's stolen.
Stolen.
Like, no, it's just old.
It's just old. It was just been worn through. Of course, this is where they get their powers from Elfangor. The blue box.
24 years old. My goodness.
That's insane. Wow, 24. Man, that's a whole person, you know?
Right.
I thought it was cool to see on page 20 of our first edition books anyway. I'm not sure what what that translates to in other editions. When Jake actually goes onto the ship and like sees pictures of Elfangor's family.
Right.
He says, something caught my eye. It was a small 3-dimensional picture. 4 Andalites standing all together, looking like a strange gathering of deer with solemn faces. 2 of them looked very small, kids. I realized that this was a picture of the Andalite's family. So you actually see that in there. And again, like
because he has to go and grab the morph box.
Yes, he goes because Elfangor's just dying. Like, because don't forget, he just came down from a huge battle with the blade.
He just all of a sudden materializes from their perspective in the sky. Like all of a sudden, there's a shooting star almost that's growing bigger and bigger and coming right for them. It's like, why did we have to cut through this construction site tonight? This time, of all the times that we've been to the mall, of all the nights that we've walked home or gotten home in some other means, tonight
something draws them, and they know they're not supposed to be there. But it's almost that captures the adolescent spirit of like, let's just do this random thing. Right. You know, like right away she just grabs you as a kid. I'm so interested in how she was able to appeal to, you know, as however old K.A. Applegate was when she wrote this, she still has a good ear and a good, writing for that kind of adolescent mind frame of like the trickery and then, you know, the dynamics between the characters and things like that. So
yeah, she was one of my favorite authors at that time for that reason, because she had such a way of not only appealing to you as a person, but she also gave you such good vivid imagery to work with that it was almost impossible not to be immersed in whatever scene you were reading about at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like you felt like you were in the gravel with them at that construction site, dodging the laser beams from the Hork-Bajir.
Getting chased through the abandoned building.
Yeah.
And remember that scene where she basically hints that a homeless guy was vaporized by one of the let's see. Okay.
Poor random bystander.
This is one of the first times this will come up. One of many, I'm sure. Pronunciations. Okay, so do you say Drakenbeam or Drakenbeam? What do you say? Dracone? Draken? I've always said Draken. I've always said Drakenbeam. I guess I don't know why, but it makes sense because dragon is dragon, so Draken.
Yeah.
Or Drake. See, I've always said Draken in my head. That's so funny.
I think the only time I've altered that is when it's like draconian.
Yeah.
Like if somehow it was
a draconian beam.
Yeah.
So if you guys hear different pronunciations on here, because like, you know, as when you're reading this stuff, you don't have, especially if before your friends got into, you know, because a lot of my friends got into Animorphs, but none as deep as me. And I'm telling you, I was so obsessed with the series. And so like, you're not really hearing other people pronounce these words. Right. And so it's like, you kind of choose your own way to do it. And I've mentioned this a few times to you off the podcast, and I want to somehow dig up this forum that I used to visit, this Animorphs forum that was through the Scholastic website, where K.A. Applegate would get on once a week or once a month for the Ask K.A. segment, kind of like a Reddit AMA. Yeah. And I'm sure she's done some Reddit AMA since then, but she would do like an almost either weekly or monthly thing where she would just take questions. Wow. And it was so cool, man. I was so into that. I forgot why I started to say that, but because I'm going to try to find it to kind of bring it up, you know.
I feel like I would have run into that through AOL at the time.
That's probably how I stumbled across it. AOL, remember that? You would just like search for different subjects. It would come up in different chat rooms. The old modem.
God, yeah.
Oh, man. And then you have on page 25, you have basically the description of each character. Because Jake is looking around, you know, Jake, the leader of everybody. And he says, Marco, his occasionally annoying best friend. Rachel, my smart, pretty, confident cousin. Cassie, who everybody knew liked animals more than she liked most people. And then he says, finally, I looked at Tobias. It was weird, the feeling I had at that moment staring at him. But of course, Tobias is kind of like an outsider, a loner. And I got the impression on this reread for the first time, I think maybe Tobias is kind of like an overweight, kind of a chubby kid. Did you ever get that vibe?
I never really got that vibe.
Because it's not on the cover. Like the model doesn't look like him.
I feel like there was a description of him whenever he's getting bullied in school where they kind of describe him as scrawny.
Oh, okay, small and fro. I picked up some line here where like Tobias started to run, but he couldn't run very fast or something. So I thought maybe that, but yeah, you're right. I do remember them saying that he was kind of a he's got
the
a
bullies
sad
were able
story,
to pick him up and flip him over and give him a swirly.
Oh man, and he's got like the story where I think his parent, well, you know, for the purpose now, we'll say his parents died, and and you know, so he's living with his aunt and uncle. They're each on different coasts, you know, or different parts of the country, and so he's just kind of being shipped back and forth to the point where like they don't even know. After a while, you know, at the end of this book, when Tobias, sadly or happily for him, maybe, it's kind of he gets stuck in the red-tailed hawk
sword. I feel like,
I feel like that's what he wanted. You know, I feel like that's what Tobias wanted.
It was a subconscious thing for him that he needed the escape, and even though technically he was trying to escape from the Yeerk pool at the time, yeah, he needed a way to just like stay away from the life that he was having to live at that point in time, because it was just such a tragic life that he had, you know, like you said, his parents weren't there. He was having to bounce back and forth between horrible aunts and uncles that like didn't care about him at all, were barely paid enough attention to know that he wasn't at either of their houses.
Yeah. Because they didn't like each other. They didn't even like each other, the aunt and uncle. And he, you know, he's going to school and getting bullied and stuff.
I always
like
wondered
that.
if they were related or if it was because they were from the opposite ends of the family.
Yeah. Well, it's like somebody had to take care of him after his parents, you know, went away.
Knowing what I know about the future, maybe it was that they were actually related.
Yeah, that could make sense. But yeah, and if you notice throughout the book, Tobias is kind of, once he finds that red-tailed hawk morph, it's like he's found freedom, and he tempts fate kind of the whole time. Like he shows up whenever they all gather. You know, we're kind of jumping ahead towards the end of the book, but the what do you call it? The climax of this book is when they find the Yeerk pool, this huge, gigantic, like. You know, they say you can fit a football field in there plus a couple of malls. That's the way it's described. Like, and he's already in Morph before they start that mission, their first mission of going down to the Yeerk pool.
Yeah.
But before that, let's go back a little bit earlier, because the first Morph of all of them, I believe, was Tobias morphing into his cat.
Yeah.
Buster, was that his name? Or
I
was
think
that,
so.
that Jake's dog? Oh God, we should know. We should know. We're the experts here. I do have a reference here in front of me. Let's check it out. Let's see here. Morphs in this book. I'll just go ahead and go through all the morphs that were in this book. Jake morphed into a golden retriever. The lizard. Dude. Okay, yeah, that was the book.
Dude
and a
is
Siberian
Tobias's
tiger. Rachel morphed into an African elephant. Tobias into Dude the cat and a red-tailed hawk. Cassie morphed into the horse. Marco acquired the silverback gorilla. And then, of course, Visser 3 morphed into some crazy things. You know, I like all his like crazy alien morphs.
Yeah.
But yeah, whenever that's
another thing I'm really excited for with the graphic novel and the live action series or the movie is to see how they visualize that first morph that he comes out with, the just ginormous monster that engulfs El Fangor.
On that graphic novel that's coming out, as we take a short detour from the plot, I'm going to look up here and see if they're actually using. Maybe they're using the actual text, like Hey Applegate's actual text, and just using, you know, and then like putting different pictures to it. It's not clear from this paragraph, which I'm reading, that says Scholastic, through its Scholastic Graphics division, is planning to launch a graphic novel of Animorphs that will launch October 6th. The first adaptation of the first novel, titled The Invasion, features art from Eisner Award nominee Chris Gine. Okay, so yeah, it looks like they're going to take the actual, you know, book and just kind of reimagine the portraits. Oh, that's going to be so exciting, dude. Did you just picture all this stuff? Like, I can see the construction site in my head. Yeah. I can see Elfangor coming off the ship, you know. I can see, like, Visser 3 morphing into this crazy thing and striking down the Andalite, like, or eating him, actually. Ate him. And the Taxons were picking the flesh off.
I will say that the first time that I saw the Hork-Bajir drawing for the Hork-Bajir Chronicles, it was a little bit off of what I expected. I didn't expect them to be quite as lanky. I expected bulkier. Because of the way they described them. They were always these huge muscular things. So I guess I kind of always imagined more like the Bulldog on Tom and Jerry type of stout
That's how she.
creatures.
Yeah, that's kind of how she describes them. And just the term arm blades, you know,
Right,
like,
yeah.
is really cool. There's some other stuff we should touch on
Makes me
here.
think of like Batman, you know.
There is the. Let's see here. Where did I write that down? There is the mistake that was made. We're gonna get this together, guys. We're just starting
I
here.
wondered
Yeah,
if
there we go.
Tobias had heard my thought. I concentrated. Tobias, can you hear me?
Yeah, he said, I can hear you. Read the other part.
Did you hear my thoughts before that? I asked.
No, I don't think it works that way. You have to think at me for me to hear. Hey, watch this. And he leapt in the air. So what happened there is that Jake, in human form, not in morph form, on page 56, communicated with Tobias when Tobias was in a morph in cat form, when he morphed into dude. And that doesn't happen for the rest of the series because it's established that thought speak can only be used between two people who are morphed, or sorry, from someone who is morphed. You can't thought speak when you're a human.
And that's also a crazy thing because I think it also comes somehow from the Andalite technology because that's how the Andalites communicate,
Right.
is through thought speech. They don't have the mouths to communicate orally like most creatures would. So, or at least the creatures that are available to us in this series. Although, now that I think about that, Yeerks didn't really have mouths. Taxons had mouths, but they didn't use them to communicate. And
Yeah.
Hork-Bajir did kind of communicate, but it was more animalistic.
They had kind of a
hisses and
hissing,
grunts
yeah.
and growls and stuff. So I guess, yeah, they had to kind of bring thought speech to the forefront. And I always thought that it was something that, like, because of the way they describe it, it seems like it was obviously intended to be capable at that point, specifically because he was in morph.
Yeah.
And somehow he could direct those thoughts at him. But the fact that they didn't use it later on, I think we
Yeah.
read earlier that she just made a decision after the fact to drop that as a possibility, so to speak.
Yeah, this was the explanation. K.A. Applegate changed her mind, but forgot to correct the scene, which seems like a big oversight. And in that form that I keep referencing, with Ask K.A., she would people would ask about that just about every week or every time she did it, and she would say each time, "That was a mistake. Sorry, I messed that up." Which is strange, but that does nothing to take away from the solid universe that is created here. I mean,
It really, it creates
Jake,
its own cosmos.
There's so many different levels. I mean, obviously the kids, it's almost like the Animorphs themselves were made to relate to everyone. Like you have Jake,
Yes.
white, male, probably the most predominant demographic who are buying the books.
Cis white males.
Yes, it's right. Exactly. You have Rachel, his cousin, the strong female, the warrior of the group.
Yeah.
Cassie, who is African American, who is like, Earth Mother, like tuned into animals and all
Kind
that.
of like the that world's extension of K.A. Applegate, kind of modeled
Yes.
after her as a kid.
Right, yeah, because you mentioned that she kind of was on a farm, sort of the same thing that Cassie had.
Similar, yeah. Her parent, I think,
Nature Rehabilitation Clinic.
I can't remember if her parents necessarily were, but she was at some point a vet tech early on in her life as like one of her first jobs.
And of course, Marcos, kind of, I guess he's Hispanic, right? I mean, obviously they don't share their last names, but
I'm trying to remember if they ever necessarily dictate that in the series or if we just pick that up based off of the
name,
artwork
the picture.
and the people. Yeah.
And then Tobias, who's kind of like the outsider. So it's like obviously
He's the bullied kid.
Yeah, which
He would have been emo if it had been a thing at that point.
if he had he not gotten stuck in the red-tailed hawk morph, he probably would have been a big emo guy. Like going into high school.
Oh, yeah.
because I think they're junior high aged, right? Like
That's what I recall it as.
because that's right.
Although
Because
in
Jake
the
tried out for the
TV series, they make it seem like they're already high schoolers. Like,
Yeah, there were a lot of issues with the TV series.
Yes.
It was exciting. Had a great theme song.
Maybe we can have a whole episode dedicated
Oh,
to
for sure. Yeah, TV special.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, I think with all of the characters being relatable, with the coolness to a kid of I can change into any animal, and the descriptions of what it's like to be that animal, like whenever Jake morphs into the lizard, all of that it gets you so drawn in. I mean, like right away too. There's no like I said, no sugarcoating. There's no hesitation before it just
Really, yeah.
it just hits like completely, man.
She does just enough to necessarily set everything up for you, give you an idea of who you're talking to, or who's talking to you rather, whose perspective you're reading, and then they immediately jump right into the action of what's going on in their life and why this is a thing. Why are we reading about you? Oh, because you've been invaded and a separate alien species has come to try and help you, and now the only reconnaissance that you have for them is seemingly dead, and although they do end up running into his brother later.
Yeah. Spoiler. And then also on book 1, here on the invasion, Marco is the guy who comes up with the name Animorphs.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Here we
I think
go.
that's also one of the reasons I liked Marco so much as a kid, because he was the one that was clever and
Yeah.
witty.
Always
which I
funny,
identified
sarcastic,
with.
ribbing with Rachel, always kind of poking fun at her. It's really fun to watch those dynamics develop. Yeah, because Marco says, talking about getting into the zoo, he says, "Oh, I'm sure we could talk them into letting us in for nothing," Marco said. "Just tell them we're Animorphs." "Tell them we're what?" Rachel said. "Idiot teenagers with a death wish," Marco said. "Animorphs." I tried the word out. It sounded okay. That's pretty cool, man. I kind of got like goosebumps whenever I read that. I'm like, oh shit, it's all starting. Dude, just how is she able to introduce all these different characters, all these different things? And it's like, it doesn't seem laborious. It doesn't seem like, if you're reading Lord of the Rings or something, there's like so many different species and trolls and names, and with this it's a little easier to digest.
I think it's because of the pace at which she introduces it, because like she'll do some fast-paced stuff when it's necessary to like create the tension in the scene, like with the construction site.
Yeah.
Where it's like just all of a sudden now this thing is crash landed and they've got almost no explanation to go off of other than go in my spaceship and grab this magical blue cube and bring it to me,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now they've got to touch this cube, absorb these powers, and they get all tingly. And then now they don't know what the hell's going on. There's another spaceship coming in, several bug fighters and the blade ship. And this whole other, what looks like the exact same kind of creature is now walking off of the enemy ship, quote unquote. But he's evil.
Right.
And he's going to like kill everybody. So they got to escape.
And you're also like, Visser 3, who's Visser 1? Like, actually, I remember, I didn't even think of the numbers, because I remember then, because of course they talk about Visser 1, Visser 2 later on in the series, but Visser 3, I was like, I never thought about that being a ranking. I was always like, oh, that's just like kind of, what his name is. His name's Visser 3
That's
or something.
the impression I got, because that's a lot of how their name structure is anyway, is like they're Escarat 259 or something like that, so.
It's also cool how she kind of leaves you wondering, like, what are these Andalites? Putting the picture in your head of like this sort of centaur-looking creature with a deadly tail, but then also Elfinger's able to, communicate to Tobias more information than he was able to tell the kids. Yeah. So they didn't find out
what
a
was
lot. Some kind. Well, we find out later. There may have been some kind of mind connection there, but and so that's basically, he kind of gives them a quick rundown, and the rest they just have to learn on instinct. It's like, how do we morph? Well, you just like concentrate on the animal. It's like,
and man, do they stumble through all that.
Yeah.
Like the very first mission they go on to, immediately Cassie's captured. They're like most powerful morpher as far as they can tell. Right. She's got the most control that any of them seem to be able to hold over.
Did they ever explain how she got captured by the police officer? Because it was a cop.
Yeah.
It was a cop who noticed her at the sharing.
Yeah, they're at the sharing with Tom, who they've already kind of determined was a controller at that point.
Man, Jake got pissed wnever Marco.
Dude, he was ready to beat his ass.
They said that Marco. She says that Marco wrapped Jake in his own bed sheet and held him there. Yeah, like held his arms down
to stifle him.
Yeah.
He's your best friend. Let him.
Right. I like their dynamic too. But yeah, I guess that same.
Which it's ironic that he's like not necessarily giving Jake shit, but like doesn't realize that he's quite in the same boat, so to speak, as we'll find out later on.
Well, Marco always. Well, first of all, that cop, the policeman, did come out to Cassie's farm, and I guess he went out there again the night of the Yeerk pool invasion. And then dragged her off and arrested her or took her to the Yeerk pool.
So that's what I never understood was that supposed to somehow be the same? Because I feel like she was just like dragged off by a variety of the personnel at the sharing, wasn't she?
Well, that was at the sharing, but then this one cop spotted her and questioned her. And then, and then that same cop came out to question all of the Animorphs when they were at Cassie's farm, but Cassie was in horse morph. But I think she morphed back, like,
cover her.
Yeah. But then they say later that it's that same cop who is escorting Cassie down the school hallway to the Yeerk pool in the janitor's closet. And it's that same cop who's like forcing her underwater to get infested by the Yeerk. But then they don't say anything about what happens to that cop. I would assume he died, because if not, then he obviously knows that something's going on with this Cassie person, So I assume that cop died down in the Yeerk pool when Visitor 3 was attacking in the 8-headed form that he was in that throws fireballs. That terrifying morph that Visitor 3 had.
It's crazy to think that even back then they're kind of describing the unrelenting powers of the police, how they just kind of show up at their house unannounced under the pretense that, we're looking for some kids that might have been shooting off fireworks in the construction site.
You kids heard anything? There's even rumors about UFOs.
It makes it seem like, because the description of her house makes it seem like she's pulled away a little bit from the city. She's not like off of a main thoroughfare.
Definitely seems out in the country.
Yeah. Whereas the way they approach, it's as if it's part of their route, and they just happen to like see some kids out. They're like, "Oh, let's go and ask them."
Just making the rounds.
How did they know to go there?
There must have been some. And of course, the Visser 3 he thinks they're Andalites when they're down in the Yeerk pool, and that goes on for a long time. It's like, and they just kind of let them think that, which is the best for everybody. Visser 3 is always there, at the wrong times, in the wrong places for those guys.
And then also that cop ends up knowing Tom, Jake's brother, so that's kind of like another foreshadowing of they've got to go to that sharing meeting because they've got to figure out more.
And another thing that I noticed kind of throughout the series from what I remember, but starting in this book, is K.A. Applegate's ability to describe the fear that they feel, because she talks a lot about like courage, and Jake is like, he admits in his head to the reader that whenever we started to go down to the Yeerk pool, I was shaking. My mouth was dry. My heart was beating, But it's like everyone was looking at me to be the leader, and it's like, whoa, Jake always has so much
de facto
pressure.
Leader, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I love how in getting a little ahead of ourselves, in other books, when the way the series is constructed, obviously there's a different narrator for each book of the 5 kids, later 6, and whenever like Jake is in the scene of another book, you always know that he's got so much on his mind, know. It's like, because not only is his brother a controller, it's like, he feels responsible from book 1 for the lives of all the rest of the Animorphs. It's just all on his shoulders.
I think for that reason, it's a good idea to go back and reread the series, just because now you've kind of got a better perspective of how each of the characters, because you've had a chance now to kind of like get familiar with them and know kind of the general direction they're each headed. Mm-hmm. So you can pick up on other subtleties that you didn't recognize the first time around in the earlier stuff, like the little thought
speak error.
Well, not just that, the like thought projection from Elfangor to Tobias. Yeah. Where it's like, why of all of them would he do that to Tobias?
Yes. The way it plays out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool, man. Yeah, they set up so much. Like, there's even that part where Jake, they're down in the Yeerk pool towards the end in this big climax scene, which it sounds like hell down there, and they don't go down there for a while, I don't want to speculate too much, but I feel like it's a little while before they go down there. But there's that one part where Jake he sees Tom, and he's kind of close to Tom, and Tom, the Yeerk is out of his head, right?
Right, yeah.
And then but Cassie is about to get infested, and so the Animorphs say, "Go save Cassie, we'll save Tom." And then it says Jake is like, "I thought about that. I would think about this moment later on."
For many years.
Yeah, for many years.
It was one of those haunting decisions that he had to make.
She must have had it all planned out, dude.
Almost like a stereotypical Batman. Okay, the villain's got your 2 different people that you need to save. Here's Gordon over here. Here's Batgirl over here, kind of thing. Decide which one's going to hit the ground or goodbye.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. She knows just what to do to really ratchet up the the tension. And I feel like with these first five books, I know that for the first few books, K.A. was the sole author. We're going to get into, with each book who perhaps the ghostwriters were, because at some point there did seem to be a kind of a formula. And I remember hearing that K.A. comes up with the storyline, and then later on ghostwriters kind of help her fill out the,
flesh out the details. Yeah.
Yeah, but dude,
that's a lot of material to have to just all on your own create. My goodness.
Oh man, dude, 54 books.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Hey, so we teased on the intro episode that we may have some questions that Max has. We'll call this segment Max Wonders.
I wonder.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect.
I wonder.
That's the opening theme
Are
for the
they sexless? The Yeerks.
Are Yeerks sexless?
Are the Yeerks sexless?
Gathering from this book, it'd be hard to say. Gathering from my entire knowledge of the canon, well, they have to produce somehow. Do they hint at them being, what do you call it when you don't have sex but you're
asexual?
Do they hint at them being asexual?
I feel like it's something along those lines. I feel like there's a description later on that we'll get to, and I don't remember if it's in the main series or if it's in one of the sidebars, like the Elemis Chronicles or the Andalite Chronicles, where they get more into depth of kind of more of the background of each of those alien races.
Yeah. I think they actually go to the planet.
Yeah. Like they have the actual star instead of
the Kendrona ray.
Right. Yeah. Which that's how I pronounce it, Kendrona.
Nice. There you go, Kendrona. All right. We got the same pronunciation there. That's good.
Although I will say I didn't soften that J in Hork Bajir for the longest time.
It's Hork Bajir, right? What would you say?
Hork Badger.
I would say Hork Bajir. What did I say? It's so funny because I was reading it today and I actually said it the way I used to say it. I would say...
Or like Bajir.
Hork Bajir. Hork Bajir. Yeah. But it's Hork Bajir, right?
Yeah.
Hork Bajir.
I think they softened that.
Yeah. So we know that the Hork Bajir, there's somewhat male, and there's two different sexes. Same for Andalites, because we referenced that Jake saw that picture on the ship of the family. Yeerks.
That was another wondering that I had.
Yeerks.
Are the Andalites and Dongalites just hanging out the whole time, or
is it more of an internal genitalia?
Yeah. Is it more like a dolphin type of thing?
Wait a second. I think we find out. I'm not going to say it right now, but I think we find out the answer to that.
It's funny. They go out to the gardens, as they call it. That was one of the things that I always wondered: is she modeling these places after like real life places that she's been, and just like changing the name, or is she hybridizing various places that she's been to? Because like the gardens is this combination zoo, amusement park, and all this other jazz.
Yeah,
and it's like it's borderline SeaWorld, but for land mammals.
It's like Fiesta, Texas mixed with, it's like Six Flags mixed with SeaWorld mixed with the zoo, San Francisco Zoo.
Yeah,
and it's pretty convenient, that Cassie has access to all these animals, not just at the nature rehabilitation clinic, but also at the gardens where she, because remember they get recognized, and he's like, "Oh, you're the doctor's, you're the vet's daughter, right?"
Yeah. She's like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just." I think they point her in the right direction too.
Here's here we go. Random trivia for you, Max. What is the name of the gorilla that Marco? Not Harambe. That Marco acquires at the gardens.
That I do not remember.
Listener, do you know? Let's think for a second. Do. Big Jim.
Big Jim.
Big Jim.
I remember that now. Big Jim.
I don't know if any of the others. I'm going to think about that for the rest of the series.
I always wondered, was that a play off of Big Joe?
Big Joe, yeah, right. Mighty Joe Young.
Young.
And that's the other. You brought up another question. I guess I'll kind of blow up one of your spots as far as Max Wonders. But you'd mentioned like
I wonder.
Yeah, about Max Wonders. Do you think about that one you said about like the age of the animal?
Yeah, I've always wondered too. That's what I was kind of gearing towards with the gardens, was when they go in to acquire these animals, how much of their current state is factored into how they end up being morphed. So like you were talking about, was it an overweight zoo cat, or was it, fresh from the jungle type of thing?
Yeah.
Was it one that was like raised in captivity its whole life, so some amount of its wild nature should be tamed, and does that factor into their morph? Which it seems like it doesn't to some degree. Like the only thing that really gets matched might be the actual physical like the way they are observed.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it feels like they've got just the most basic version of that particular animal. Like every tiger is going to virtually feel this way to some degree. Every male tiger.
And they acquire the DNA and then they morph into that. So my guess is that.
And then, what happens if they say do that to a puppy, or
do they morph into the puppy, or do they morph into the grown?
Is age related to your DNA?
I feel like without any, they get better at morphing as they go. They learn different little tricks and become a little faster and things. I feel like after they learn some skills at it, they can probably morph into maybe a little younger, more slick version of that animal. But I think at first in these first books, they go into the exact animal, the lazy zoo cat, but they have that human brain to attack a little harder and maybe go a little faster than the actual tiger itself could go.
And that's what's crazy is they talk about where they sometimes have to transition back and forth between being cat brain or hawk brain or whatever versus their own human mind, especially for Tobias when he's trying to fight like the raw natural animal instincts of the hawk to like go eat some roadkill.
Yeah. and Jake actually eats a spider in his lizard morph.
Yeah.
I always thought that was a fun morph. That was like the dog, dude, in the dog morph too, man. Whenever they go to the sharing meeting and Jake morphs into a dog, and then he sees that his brother Tom is a controller, and he talks about how he
smell it.
Yeah, he can smell it. I mean, he can. Yeah, it's so cool. But then the fact that he gets depressed as a human in this form because his brother's a controller, and then he talks about how he lets the dog brain take over as if it's almost like an instant antidepressant.
Right. Yeah.
Just like the happiness and carefreeness of a dog. He's like, I lost myself in the dog mind for a while. It's like, man, I wish I had a little dog brain DNA up in my head. Just kind of drift into every once in a while.
Switch off and just be like,
how cool would that be, man?
Makes me think of my pups. Like, what are they thinking all day? Like,
yeah.
Okay, Dad. Time for food.
Yeah. Food, cuddles, sleep, food.
You moved your foot. Does that mean we're going outside?
So out of all these more, would you rather, because they talk a lot about dogs and they talk a lot about birds in this book from Tobias's standpoint, would you rather morph, if you had the ability to morph into either just a dog or just a bird, which one would it be for you?
I think I would probably have to go with the bird because I've been able to run and I feel like I've had a relatively good sense of smell most of my life anyway.
Nice.
So I wouldn't mind having the even more acute vision than my LASIK has given me now, which that was cool. A couple years ago, I got to get LASIK and get rid of my glasses and contacts.
Dude,
and now
I got to get on that. That's awesome.
It's definitely worth it, in my opinion. We'll see 10 years down the road.
Yeah, supposedly it still deteriorates to a lesser vision than that of a red-tailed hawk. So you'd rather go into the bird for the flying
for the flying
vision.
And for the vision, yeah.
Dude, because Tobias talks, man, and that's
Those
another part of
thermals.
this series is the way she writes the bird morphs. In this book, the way Tobias describes it, and there's that scene where Jake is copying Tobias's notes, and Tobias is like drawing pictures in the margins of what a city looks like from above. Just like the majesty of the warm thermals kind of just lifting you up under your wings, and you're just above everything. Imagine how calming that would be to a kid like Tobias.
Ever since I read that description, I've always wanted that feeling. There's no way you can get it, but like, what does it feel like to have that warm air pushing you up?
Yeah, exactly. I'm convinced that that they'll have good enough like artificial intelligence one of these days to be able to put us into a
VR Animorphs experience.
Maybe by the time, maybe by the time they finally get around to the movie, that'll be something that's there. But this is a great one, man. I love this book. I'm still really excited that we're doing this podcast. I can't wait to get to the rest of these, man. This was, I will say, stats on this book. I think the page, there's on our first editions, Max Size, there's 184 pages before the preview to number 2, The Visitor, begins. Yep. And we looked through some of my other Animorphs books. We think that besides the offshoots, besides the chronicles and things, that this may be the longest out of the 54, regular books that there are. And which would make sense because there's a lot to pack into the first to the first book. You know,
I'm kind of curious now if that online version has the pages broken up in the same manner. Yeah, because you'll have some pages where it's the end of the chapter and they got like 3 lines or something. You know?
Yeah, like we said, you can read these books online, which I'm going to have to do because I actually don't have. Hopefully, by the end of this podcast, maybe we'll have all the books, but I don't have book 2, so I'm going to have to read that online. But I would prefer to have the books in my hands, you know.
Right.
But dude, imagine how hard they're going to be to find when this movie comes out.
Oh my god,
it's going to be insane. And the graphic novel and stuff. I guess we'll just have to buy every graphic novel that comes out.
Yeah,
until
I guess
all the way
so.
then. Do you think they'll do the Andalite, the Chronicles and the offshoots and stuff?
That would be really dope. That's what I'm also really excited for. When I started reading that, I was like, okay, but what are they going to do for all those offshoots? Like,
Right.
Are they just handling the series, or it'd be really cool if they somehow incorporated it the same way that we're intending to with Dars. You know, they as it chronologically came out or throughout their timeline, have them go through that particular instance. Maybe not so much the Alternamorphs and stuff like that.
Alternamorphs those are the ones that if you're going to get rid of any. Out of all the books, those seem most like a money grab kind of Alternamorphs.
I feel like they were just part of the same kind of gimmick that Scholastic was doing with a lot of their books. Like Animorphs did it, Goosebumps did it. I feel like there was
Choose Your
another
Own
couple.
Adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
But shout out to Scholastic for like letting for not making it into a child's book, you know,
Right.
and instead it's a young adult book, you know, like they didn't like censor it big time.
Yeah, because none of those scenes would have the same impact if you didn't have the vaporized random, migrant, the actual eating of Elfangor,
The human controllers,
the descriptions of.
They're trying to save these human controllers coming out of the Yeerk pool, and Visser 3 is just evaporating them with those fireballs.
Yeah.
You know, and in this book, it says that they saved a lady. They actually got out with one lady. And then I don't know if they follow up on that. So what's up with that?
I really don't think they do. That's a good question, and I've always wondered, like, what happens to her?
What happens to the one lady who survived?
Does she get recaptured because they were already in her head? They know where she would go and all that jazz. You know,
dude, how freaky are Yeerks, man? When I used to go to bed at night, and I would be, after reading these books, and I would put one ear on the pillow and then my other ear would be sticking up in the air. I'd be like, man, I don't want a Yeerk to come in while I'm sleeping and go in my ear, Like, would you ever think about that?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What if this stuff was real? Because, as a kid, you use your imagination so strongly and kind of put yourself into their position.
and it didn't help that I would see random stories about people getting the earwigs or a roach or something crawling, or a spider for that matter, crawling in, laying eggs.
Oh, man. I can't wait to talk more about the Yeerks being in the controller's head and that interaction and what that's like.
That's so crazy
Yeah.
to get sucked out of your own consciousness, basically, and be kind of like imprisoned in your mind.
And I don't think that's ever been I haven't seen that in any other sci-fi series, like a thing where a slug gets into your head and sinks into your brain and controls you. I mean, there's been like pod people, but that's not the same thing.
I feel like there was something like that on Star Trek at one point. There was a parasitic type bug, and I don't think it worked quite the same as the Yeerk. They didn't like seep in through the ear and expand over your brain and like flatten out and fill all the crevices and all that jazz, which implies to me that somehow they are able to, like when you sit on a leather couch, you start kind of like barely getting attached to it and you have to peel yourself off of the couch. Seems like their body material, whatever they're made of, is similar enough to whatever brain matter is most consistently made of, that they're able to just immediately attach to it no matter what animal it is or what creature, or alien or species. Also curious as to whether or not they would be able to control like animals that way. Like, why haven't they just also implanted and a Yeerk into like a bear brain?
Yeah, there's a little bit of suspension. Like, if I was reading these books for the first time as a 32-year-old, I would have to suspend some disbelief for this. Like, because who isn't going to notice a gigantic Yeerk pool underneath the city, But then at the same time, if they've overtaken the
necessary people,
the necessary people, yes. How long do you think the Yeerk invasion had been going on before Elfangor gave the Andalite the Animorphs power?
Well, what I thought based off of the book that we read here, it was at least 5 to 10 years worth of already infiltrating. It seems like, but I think we find out later on in one of the offshoots that it's actually been way longer than that. It's been multiple decades.
Any guesses on where the Animorphs are in the country?
That's one of the things I always was trying to figure out too. I was always looking at the descriptions of the places like, okay, obviously they're on a coast somewhere. Are they like Seattle, California type of area?
I always thought West Coast.
Yeah,
I always got a West Coast vibe.
Same. I always got a West Coast impression. Although every once in a while I would get a very East Coast vibe whenever they would be talking about like Cassie or like the Osprey and stuff like that. But I mean, they're both shores. They kind of ultimately geographically are very similar.
Yeah. Well, I'm mostly impressed by the forethought of the story that K. Applegate already had in mind while writing this. All the little setups that they have for the future.
It seems quite obvious that they had a lot of it already mapped out before they even got the first book written off.
Yeah. And we, as we progress into this podcast, I mean, the more questions we have, the more research we're going to do. I think it's safe to say that our interest, you and my interest in Animorphs, isn't based right now on internet fandom. I mean, our interest is basically based on our somewhat nostalgia for the series.
Yes, exactly.
And so, all these questions that we're asking, the answers are probably out there, but, we're kind of finding it out for ourselves. And as this progresses, we may move into this sort of the forums and the subreddits and, to find out every little thing. And
go all the way down the A-hole.
Yeah, just like that. But I think the primary source, I believe, is the most important thing about this, the books themselves. And that's what we're going to go through on here. As we start to conclude things here, what's your favorite part of this book, Max?
I think my favorite part of this book is the fight scene down in the Yeerk pool.
Yeah.
Because of how intense it gets. It already has the same level of intensity as like the opening couple of scenes where you're already getting invaded and whatnot, but to get all the description of not only how Jake was feeling like dealing with the morph, just in and of itself, having to deal with the morph and the mind of the cat and having to fight all the urges to panic or run or fight something, On top of that, he's also having to control himself in regards to like his brother and the actual point of the mission and what they're there to do, especially now that Cassie's been taken captive and is headed for Yeerkdom.
Right.
Like that scene. And then it ends up being the setup point for pretty much a lot of the rest of their adventures, because they discover a lot about how they operate with the Yeerk pools and chondronal rays and how often they need to go back and all that stuff. But they also kind of get a glimpse at the way the people are dealt with when they're not being controlled, and get ideas from that on how to possibly get them free later on. And
the fact that some of them are voluntary, some of the control are voluntary.
That's what's also insane to me.
Not as unbelievable as I once thought it was. As I've grown up, I'm like, I could definitely see some people just, crawl into my head, man, whatever.
Be like the opposite side of the coin for what Tobias was wanting to do. He had his own now version of the escape. Who knows if a Yeerk had gotten to him first, maybe he would have been like, you know what? F this life.
Right.
Please take control and make it better.
It's a good thing that wasn't the case. I would say my favorite part is also the whole Yeerk pool climax scene at the end. It's just so epic. And like you said, they gained so much knowledge from going down there. And, the fact that they were just brave enough to not even, Marco hesitates a little bit because of his dad, because if Marco goes, then it's just his dad. And so, but, the fact that they got the courage and they went down there and they had this like brutal face off. And really it's just the description the picture that I still have in my head of this huge Yeerk pool. It makes you think that like wherever the Yeerk invasion is on Earth, it's kind of centered right there. Like that's probably either the only Yeerk pool or the biggest Yeerk pool that there probably is.
That was another question I had was, okay, let's presume that they're probably in America because that's where she's writing from theoretically.
Yeah.
Are there similar Yeerk pools in like London, in Beijing, in Hong Kong? Like we're through all out the world. are they also already invaded?
I get the impression that it's just this town, or there's maybe like small ones otherwise, but if they had already invaded other major cities, then they probably would have won. I think the Animorphs come along just right at the tipping point where either the Yeerks are going to win or they're going to meet some resistance, because the Andalites were just heading to Earth at the beginning of this book when the Blade ship attacked. And so I feel like they're right at the point now where it could spread worldwide, but they're just came along at the right time to keep a bottle cap on it.
Yeah. I can feel that impression because now that you say that, I do remember feeling like it seems like it's still relatively localized. Mm-hmm. But I feel like they also do mention that there's probably some smaller pools, like you said, off in other remoter locations.
Other areas.
Especially since, we won't get that far ahead.
Before we get too ahead of ourselves, episode one of the world's only Animorphs podcast, based on book 1 of the Animorphs series, The Invasion. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. This is awesome. We're going to get book 2 under our belts and then come back and talk to you guys about that.
Quick side note.
Yes.
Also, the other reason I was talking about the Yeerk pool scene, it sets up Tobias for the rest of the series. Because he gets trapped in his hawk morph.
That's right.
And I would say it's debatable as to whether or not he did it intentionally or not. I feel like there was probably an opportunity for him to at least demorph and remorph.
I think it was intentional.
Yeah.
I think it was intentional. I really do. I think he just loved the hawk so much and he felt more in place there than before. And this reading comes from the last page of the book that is related to that part, where Tobias comes and flies into Jake's room after they get home from the Yeerk pool and tells Jake, he says, "I guess this is me from now on," Tobias said. "I knew there were tears rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't care anymore. It's okay, Jake. Like you said, we're alive." I went to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, around one of those cold twinkling stars, was the Andalite homeworld. Somewhere up there was hope. "They'll come," Tobias said. "The Andalites will come. And until then," I nodded and wiped away my tears. "Yeah," I said. "Until then, we fight." And we will continue to fight against the Yeerk invasion here on the world's only Animorphs podcast. My name is Michael.
And my name is Max.
And you guys stay tuned. Make sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll see you next week with book 2. Ooh, what is book 2 called? Let's find that. Gotta have that so we can tease it here. Do you remember? Is it The Return? That's not it, is it? Let's see here.
It's right here.
Books.
The Visitor.
The Visitor. Book 2, The Visitor. Coming next week. All right, guys.
Such aficionados.
Everybody enjoy. Remember, you can read these books online. Read them along with us, and we'll be talking about book 2 next time. We love you guys.
Peace.
Peace.